Signore e signori, buonasera, benvenuti alla Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò della New York University. We are delighted to have this evening the first event of the season of Addressing Style. Addressing Style, as you know, is a series conceived and organized by Grazia and Eugenia Paulicelli, to whom I'm very grateful because they came up with the idea and they come up year after year with the guests and the events that they propose to us. As you know, fashion, style, design are some of the strongholds of Italian culture and Italian economics. So we are delighted that thanks to Grazia and Eugenia, we are able to present this very important facet of Italian contemporary life. I'm not going to say anything about the special guest that we have tonight because I'm going to leave that honor to Grazia D'Annunzio, who is US Special Project Editor for Vogue Italia. A footnote, as you might know, this evening Casa is bustling with activities. We had three things at the same time. We have going on. We have a book club that met on the third floor to discuss a novel by Dacio Maraini. We have a conference on the second floor about the palaces of memory from the Renaissance to today, and in the auditorium we have Pat Cleveland for Addressing Style. So lots of things going on. This is a normal day in the life of Casa Italiana Zerilli-Marimò, and I'm delightful that with all the things that you can do in New York tonight, you chose to be here with us. Please welcome Grazia D'Annunzio.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you very much, and happy to see all of you here. And tonight, I'm really delighted to have with us Pat Cleveland. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to start our conversation. Vogue's André Talley described her as the first black supermodel, the Josephine Baker of the international runways. Back in the 70s, Pat's unique and unconventional flair graced many fashion magazine covers and conquered designers such as Valentino, Karl Lagerfeld, Stephen Burrows, and later Moschino and Lanvin. We can indeed say that in the history of modeling, we had a before Pat and after Pat moment. Before Pat, models walked down the runways almost like soldiers or robots, looked pretty and showed artificial and mincing poses. Then along came Pat and everything changed. She played with the clothes, she danced, she jumped, swirled, and shared with us an irresistible joie de vivre, a sparkling enthusiasm, a technicolor wave of feeling emotions. Everybody was really galvanized by her. And I remember Pat, I have wonderful memories of her, back then when we were all young and full of life. Anyway, she quickly became an icon by making fashion alive. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the one and the only Pat Cleveland. And relax and enjoy the conversation. So, this is the cover, as you can see, of Pat's recent memoir, just published, Walking with the Muses. She's a muse herself, but she got many muses along her life. So why you decided to write a memoir all of a sudden?
It's important to honor the people that have given you a place in their hearts in fashion, and the people are important, so that's why I wrote the book.
All right. And so let's recap your life quickly for everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Pat when she was a baby. And
a day.
Yes, and this is Pat's mother, the wonderful Lady Burr Cleveland, who was a single mother who raised Pat in Harlem, and she was a wonderful artist.
Yes.
So you had a very special relationship with your mom, and so tell us about the bond that you created.
My mother was very artistic, and she made all of her own clothing, and she inspired me to understand to take the value of yourself and bloom in sort of a marvelous way, as she always adorned herself when she went out in the evenings. And I saw that, and I thought, this woman is having a really good time in life. And I thought somehow fashion must have been the most important thing in the world, because it got her out and made her happy.
But your mom was also an artist, and
Yes.
see, this is a picture of her posing in front of her.
With Van Vechten. Karl Van Vechten was a photographer who photographed people of the Harlem Renaissance, and he photographed my mother. She was very young when she won awards. She was 15 when she won a Pratt Institute Award, but being from Georgia, she was not able to take it so early. She was 15 when she received that award. And I think she painted all of her life, always reaching for that art in herself. That's inspired me too.
So you also are an artist. You paint,
Yeah,
right?
I do paint.
And you love art. This
I
is
love
something that you share with your mom.
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, you get it in your DNA, kind of. You know, you grow up drinking the watercolor paint water, and you think it's Kool-Aid, and then your mother says, "Well, if you don't drink it, you won't be an artist." So, things like that. And if you don't put on your makeup, you're going to be an old maid. Why don't you put on mascara? And I think that's something, you know, that moms do, I guess. You know, if you're lucky.
What is the best thing that your mom taught you? Had taught you?
The value of yourself. I think, you know, always take pride in yourself and present yourself in a certain way. Good clothes open doors, isn't that what they say now? So she always taught me to care really much, very much about your inner self, and you know, let that come out. Be inspired. Don't be afraid. You know, no matter what happens in the circumstances around you, keep art alive. You know, always use your imagination.
This is a painting of Pat when Pat was 12 years old, done by her mother. What kind of girl were you?
I was a good girl.
Okay, good.
I was a good girl because I had a single mother who worked really hard to keep me alive. And at night, she used to work at the Bellevue Hospital, taking care of really insane people, murderers. And I remember one time she came home with the story. You know, I just did a drawing of someone who's going to the electric chair, and they're taking my drawing with them, because she was the last nice person they saw. But I was a good girl, and I listened to her stories, and they taught me how to stay out of trouble. And I used to do really good things, wash the dishes and clean up after myself. You know, those are the values you have, especially in the 50s. Little girls were good, you know, and we had to be good, or else.
Yeah. And here we go with Pat, 14 years old, posing for the first time in front of a camera with her own clothes, because you didn't want to become a model. You wanted to become a fashion designer, right?
Well, I had it in my soul. My auntie and my mommy, they used to all the time had a creative mess in the living room with boa feathers and sequins and making clothes. And I thought, I have to be a part of this group. They were single ladies. They were just two ladies in the world making clothes, and I wanted to party too. So I thought, I have to be a designer. Made that dress, my first dress, and kept sewing.
Where did you study, Pat?
I studied at the School of Art and Design.
Here in New York?
Yes, in New York. And it was wonderful because Stephen Meisel was there, Antonio Lopez, Calvin Klein. Many of the very popular designers and artists went to that school. But it was sort of funny because we weren't that free, really. We were not even allowed to wear blue jeans. And then, boom, I started wearing mini skirts to school. Go home and change. And
have a seat. You know, don't stand up. If you want, have a seat and relax and enjoy.
Yeah.
So this is very important. It's your first cover. Pat was 16 years old.
Oh, goodness.
And I would like you to tell us about the importance of this publication, which is Ebony, and the fair that you
Yeah.
went to.
The Ebony Fashion Fair was the vision of Mrs. Johnson, who had the publication of Ebony magazine. And it was really important because the clothing was bought by Mrs. Johnson. She would go to Paris and order Yves Saint Laurent and Givenchy and Courrèges and all those wonderful designers. But she didn't borrow the clothes. She bought entire collections, brought them back to America, put them in the belly of the Greyhound bus with 10 girls traveling all over America, black girls in the South, black girls in the North, and we had to take those clothes, show those clothes to the society ladies, because they would buy tickets, and the money from the tickets would give a scholarship to young people who couldn't afford to go to school. So it was really important. It was groundbreaking.
Ebony was is still a magazine for black people.
Yes, and it was groundbreaking. It was the Bible of black society. And if you didn't have Ebony in your home, you didn't know what was going on. And there was also Jet, which I had the cover of.
Yes.
So that was a very big deal because I grew up in the black culture. And so it was like, da-da, you know.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you wrote that you were not black enough to be considered black and not white enough to be considered white, because Pat has a nice mix. Pat is half Cherokee, a little bit black, Irish, so it's a mix. So was it difficult to become a model in a society where the Caucasian beauty was the standard, the only beauty that back in the 60s, sorry, I mean, no one was on the cover of Vogue.
Well, it was very difficult, but I got inspired, in a very early age. I remember Daniel Luna. She had gone to Germany and Europe, and she was in Stern, and I thought, this is a wonderful girl. And Carol Labrie had the first cover of Italian Vogue as a woman of color, a black girl, and I thought, oh, this is a possibility. But I was so young, and I was looking at their pictures, and I didn't have the good fortune of having all of those opportunities, because in America, there was such a divide, It was like, oh, black people are slaves, no good, they go to jail, and oh, who cares about them? It was horrible to be considered the not good people in my skin and blood. Who saw what was on the outside of me? I only saw my heart beating, and I thought, my God, I have to be something. Why can't I be accepted, And it was very difficult. So I knocked on doors, and I believed very strongly that, maybe things will change and people will be in love with each other, just as my parents were, which was very difficult at that time. My father being from Sweden, my mom from Georgia, a black lady, and it was just impossible. It was just impossible, the attitudes in America. But then in Europe, it was so different, right?
But she was not on the cover of Vogue, but in 1968, I think, she landed in this section of Vogue called Vogue's Own Boutique. So tell us how you ended up being in Vogue and who discovered you.
Well, I was walking home from school one day with my girlfriend Frances, and there was a bus strike, and so we had to take the subway, and it took us way down to 42nd Street, and we were kind of lost in the shuttle going across under the Gray Bar building, that beautiful subway station here in New York. And I was walking really fast with the group going along, and then suddenly this lady was following me, and my girlfriend said, "Run, she's following us," and she looked so nice. I said, "I'm not running." She looked really elegant and nice, and I stopped, and it was like dominoes. There were so many people in the subway, it sort of fell over. And she said, "Oh, thank you for stopping. I've been following you across town. I'm from Vogue, and I love the way you're dressed. Can you please come show us your clothing?" And at that time, I was so into making clothes. I used to stay up at night, every night, making a new outfit to go to school. I was a little late sometimes, but at least I looked fashionably presentable. And so then I was discovered by Vogue, and they liked my clothes, and they gave me the opportunity to be in their Vogue's Own Boutique. And the next day, I was taken by Joel Schumacher to the park, and I met Stephen Burrows and a whole bunch of people. But other than that, I thought I was going to be a designer. I had a double-page spread in Vogue, too.
The lady who discovered Pat is the legendary Carrie Donovan. Yeah. If you are familiar with, the history of fashion, and she was a very influential fashion journalist, and she wore these huge, frames, and she had white white hair. So who else was in this picture?
Well, basically, this photograph was done by Barry Berenson, Marisa Berenson's sister, and she was a young photographer, and we sort of met and jumped in the limo, and it was the middle of January, freezing cold. Fly the kite. We didn't care. This is on the top of Dog Hill. You know where that is, next to the Metropolitan Museum? So we ran up the hill, and we quick did the picture, jumped back in the limo.
This
and
is
went,
another picture of
this
Pat.
Is from the double-page spread.
Yeah.
That's an outfit I made with old lace, and it was sort of, are we going to go maxi or mini? We didn't know.
So I think it was always fascinating to see that Pat started working for Vogue, not as a model, but as a young as a young fashion designer.
I had a passion for making things different. You know, I got that from my mom. And then I used to design things for the cheetah. There was a tiger moss, and I used to make colorful mini skirts with ostrich feathers and kind of crazy things, and I'd dance around, and people would, in the night, I would make like 20 outfits, and they'd all be sold before I got home, and it was like, Ma, look, I sold clothes. I was so happy.
Barry Berenson is Marisa Berenson's sister. She was married to Anthony Perkins, and she died during September 11. She was on one of the planes.
One of the second
plane. And she was a wonderful human being and wonderful photographer and a good friend, right?
A good friend. I knew her since I was a teenager, so it was devastating. But you can go down and see her name next to the Vogue offices down there.
Oh,
so,
yes.
you know, I mean, however, we all go to heaven eventually.
And also you were a good friend of Marisa, right?
Yeah, and we're still friends. Oh, my God, she's the most beautiful person in the world. I mean, she's lovely. You know, you look in the magazines and you think, is that a real person? You know, and then you finally meet them and they become your friend, and you're like, I can't believe this is my dream come true. You know, it's like, now they have it all on the internet where you can meet people. I don't know. I don't do that. I look in the magazines.
Pat and Stephen Burrows. Stephen Burrows is a very influential fashion designer that back in the late 60s, early 70s, reshaped the style of downtown New York, and he injected a lot of color and sexiness in his clothes, in his creation. Pat was one of Stephen's, is still a very good friend of Stephen Burrows. I would like to know the relationship between you and him, but also from a working point of view, a relationship between a designer and a model.
It's a natural thing. It was such a natural thing for a designer to find their own models. And it just happened that it was a mistake that I met Stephen, because there was another girl that Carrie was supposed to send over. But when I arrived, he told me, you look just like my drawings. And it was like, his drawings were just like my drawings. So I said, I'm going to stop designing. I've met my master. You know how some people intern? Well, I just gave up designing, and I went to work with Stephen Burrows as his model. And he made every garment on me, and he draped everything on me in this wonderful matte jersey fabric, which was like the big deal in the 70s, because it was so sheer and you could go dancing in it. It was lightweight, and I felt like a butterfly. He had so many rainbow colors. When we left Bindel's every day, people thought we were circus, but we weren't. We said, where are you? Are you performers? Yes, we're performing in life. And then we go out to Fire Island and party in the limos and have the music going, and the music brought everything to a certain plateau.
He had, Stephen Burrows had his boutique opposite Max Kansas City on Park Avenue South, where Andy Warhol used to hang out every single day.
Every day.
So, and the Museum of the City of New York did a wonderful exhibition on Stephen Burrows a couple of years ago.
Yes,
and,
it was perfect clothes, colorful, and a lot of his friends showed up. And, the O Boutique was very popular. It was the downtown boutique and Cher, and all the musicians used to go there to get those kind of chamois pants with the fringes on them. Everybody had fringes in the 70s. We were all like free, like Indians, woo. And so we had those colors, and we had those big hairdos, and we were like bell bottoms and boogalooing, and then we had some wonderful music.
So Pat is multitasking, and also, she's a big traveler. So from downtown New York. She also went uptown New York, Upper East Side. And here she's photographed with another legend who is Halston. And there is another face that probably you can recognize in that group, and is Angelica Houston. Angelica Houston she started as a model and then she eventually became an actress. So Halston was the big thing of the Upper East Side. So how was working? You were famous also for being an Halstonette.
A Halstonette. At the time, the Supremes were very famous, so we had to have our own group. So he called us girls the Halstonettes. And we would travel around the country and travel around the world with these wonderful pieces of luggage and entire wardrobes. We went to China, we did the Wall of China, went to Paris. But Angelica, she was so modest and sweet and nice, and Halston was a charmer. All the society ladies loved him because he draped them in cashmere and chiffon and diamonds. He was very generous. He was always having lovely lunches, and ladies loved him. It was just beautiful.
And he was one of the feature of Studio 54, right?
Oh, well, he just showed up, and then everybody started pursuing that world.
Did you have a lot of fun with him?
Oh, my God. We went dancing all the time. My shoes never saw the pavement. It was always from the house to the limo, So we had kind of a limo life, but we had like a wagon train of limos. There would not be only one, but there'd be like 5 or 6 of us. And then, just in the car, beautiful champagne, cashmere and chiffon. That was our life, really. It was wonderful.
Not bad.
And we did crazy things like go out to Hollywood and do the Love Boat. And he was sort of one of the people who wanted to dress everybody in America. He did J.C. Penney. Can you imagine? At that time, that was like, taboo, don't dress everybody. And he was like the first to do stuff like that. And we loved him for that,
When I told you before that Pat revolutionized the way of walking down the catwalk, this is what she did. So tell us where was it and what did you do? Which fashion show was that?
This is at the Plaza Hotel. We used to do all the shows there, and they would say, now go out and do what you want, but make everybody feel good. And so there were no cameras or anything that would say, that they would tell you, you're not supposed to do that. So I just sort of felt so elated. I just jumped across the stage and everybody loved it. I felt free, because you can do what you want. It was a very free time. And backstage were all the 7th Avenue designers. Actually, you had Oscar de la Renta, you had Halston and Anne Klein and Calvin Klein. Everybody would be in the same room together doing these wonderful fashion shows, Fashion Week in New York, sharing the same stage at the same time.
That's nice.
That was really nice.
Okay, I love this picture because I love Pat, and I also really love that gentleman there, Antonio Lopez, one of the greatest, if it's not the greatest, the greatest illustrator, fashion illustrator of the second part of the last century. Antonio worked a lot also with Italy, had a special relationship with Italy. He worked a lot with the Missoni family, for instance, with Gianfranco Ferré. And also with our common dear friend, the late Anna Piaggi. She was extremely influential. She was a journalist of Italian Vogue, who in the early 80s edited a Condé Nast magazine that doesn't exist anymore because it was too revolutionary, so good to be true, too good to be true, called Vanity. And Vanity was a magazine where fashion illustrators had an arena to show their talents, more than fashion photographers. So it was a book that was not entirely, but mostly devoted on fashion illustration. So you were not one of his closest friends, right? If it's not the best friend.
Yeah, my best friend took me to Europe, and he put me on a pedestal, and he drew me every day, along with Donna Jordan and Corey Tippin, the wild American pop-art company that he kept, and it sort of enticed Karl Lagerfeld to come along and join us. But Antonio was such an inspiration because he kind of took the street rats and made them gorgeous. You know, he sort of made us all sort of blend together pre-Benetton. And we went over with this feeling that the Americans have arrived in Europe, and we brought this sort of pop art energy, and his sketches were so passionate, and you know, when he sketched, you could actually hear life coming into the strokes onto the paper. And everyone adored him because he included everyone into his life. He made everyone feel beautiful, especially if he drew you. He wanted to look like that. Oh, I hope.
So why did you move to Paris with him? And you live, how many years did you live in Paris?
Oh my goodness, I spent most of my time there. I lived in Châtelet, but before that I lived with Antonio in a tiny apartment across from the School of the Beaux-Arts. And it was wild. There were so many art stores, and we'd go shopping for art materials, and people would see him and just go crazy. I lived in Paris a long time. I had a
From the
wonderful
70s, from 1970, 71?
Yeah, till 75 or 78. And I had this little apartment in Châtelet, which was really fun. Châtelet at the time was kind of dangerous. All the ladies of the night used to live there. But they were my girlfriends, so I used to give them little trinkets, and they'd walk me home to make sure I was safe. But
why did you go to Paris? Why did you go to Europe? Because you couldn't work a lot here in the U.S. I mean,
I didn't feel that my seed was growing here. I needed to just fly over there and be a part of something like the expats, and reading all those books about Paris and Josephine Baker and Hemingway and all those great artists and Picasso. You just had to get over there. You had to get over there and meet these people, because they were so available. You could actually touch them with your hands and eat a meal with them, and just live in this kind of divine fantasy. A Parisian fantasy, an Italian fantasy. Oh my God, how many Italian movies did I see with the little scarf and the Vespa, the tight skirt? I just couldn't wait to get over there and hang off a Vespa. You know what I mean?
She went to Europe, and she did it, right. She was right, because in 1971, Pat gained a lot of European covers, like L'Officiel. This is 1971. Black model on a magazine, on a European fashion magazine. Was quite revolutionary. And then Vanity Fair, which was British Vanity Fair. So do you think that Europe was more open to accept black beauties than American?
I think they're more used to using all the colors on the palette, because, the culture was like so mixed. You had African and Moroccan, Swedes, you had Italians and Germans, you had everything there. You had the Indians coming. You had such a melange of wonderful culture, and so then it was more accepting. Here it was different and hard, and everybody was separate, and so. But I did have good energy from America, so it kind of blended together. It went together, It was good.
Right.
It was good for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch out this trio. Donna Jordan, great fashion model and very good friend of
Toscani. Oliviero
Toscani, and very good friend of Pat. Pat and Corey Tippin. Corey Tippin was a makeup artist. They are wearing Chloe dresses, and Chloe was a label that back then was designed by Karl Lagerfeld.
Yes, Karl.
So you were a very good friend of Karl. This is another photograph with Karl Lagerfeld when he was a young, handsome guy.
Yes.
And yourself, yes.
He was
and
very
yourself. You became very close to Karl. Karl was one of the first designers who had a group of people who always followed him, having dinner together and, sharing together the everyday life, right?
A flock of peacocks arriving, and then the feathers would open and we'd take over. And it was just fun because Karl just wanted to show us his world, and we were just bringing that American spirit over, and he wanted to be part of something young and new, and he opened the castle doors and showed us how to drink champagne and used the right fork and knife, and ooh la la, it was very fantastic there on Rue Bonaparte.
Rue Bonaparte is where Karl Lagerfeld used to live.
He had a little,
now
little
that he lives nearby in Rue de Lille, not that far away.
University.
Université.
And so we had lovely afternoons. After the sketching, Antonio would sketch for hours, and then Karl would come over. It's time to play. Let's go to the floor. And then when we got there, we'd draw on all the tablecloths and tease the waiters, and Donna would flirt with the boys, and it was just sort of wild. It was just we couldn't get enough.
You did a lot of show for Chloe, right?
Oh, my first show for Chloe, coming down the stairs into the audience of Paris, and everyone applauding. I had never had that kind of feeling before. And the clothes were so beautiful. He was always saying, now you're going to be a character. Today you're going to be Josephine, Queen Josephine. And tomorrow you're going to be Coco. And he'd make these crazy little drawings like I was Coco Chanel or somebody else like that. And so I had to live up to his fantasies.
Karl Lagerfeld is also a great photographer and a great illustrator himself.
Yes.
And well, you were part of Karl Lagerfeld's closest group of friends, but despite of this rivalry between the two, you were also a good friend of Monsieur Saint Laurent.
Yeah.
Totally different, but back then Saint Laurent, early 70s, Saint Laurent and Lagerfeld were the youngest and the most talented in Paris. So, and definitely a different personality and a different aesthetic. So how was working with him?
When I first worked with him, he said, let's go to the Eiffel Tower after the show. So he's completely bohemian in his nature, but he sort of gave clothing, how do you call it? I can't think of the word. But anyway, joie de vivre. He was very colorful. Everybody called him the Blackfoot because he was always in Morocco and everything. So he brought that kind of exotic thing, and he always used black girls in his show, which was very strange because the first time I went to Paris, I had to go to his show because I wanted to see this one black girl in the show. So I went to the show, and it's all in my book, all of these things, about him. But I had a wonderful time with him, and he was very quiet, but so creative. He would throw a bolt of fabric out and go, voila, that's it. And then he'd come over and tie a big bow around you and be very satisfied about it. He had a lot of satisfaction.
Now we have a small, very small portfolio of early photographs of Pat taken by great photographers. So this is a portrait of
June Newton.
June Newton, Alice Springs.
Alice Springs, the wife of Helmut Newton.
And that was 1971.
Yes.
This is Giampaolo Barbieri, our lovely Giampaolo Barbieri, one of the greatest Italian photographer.
Yes.
And this is for Linea Italiana, one of the most influential fashion magazine that we had in Italy in the 70s.
Yes.
I love that.
That's Helmut Newton and Jean-Paul Gaultier. Helmut Newton saw me coming down the street, and someone took this picture of him chasing me. I was on my way to Yves Saint Laurent show. And that's Jean-Paul Gaultier. He does all of the great parades.
And Jean-Paul Gaultier is the one who did a wonderful series of photographs of Grace Jones, among the rest.
I introduced them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he said, do you want to sing? I said, no, I have a friend who can sing, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
And this is Peter Lindbergh.
Oh, yeah.
And this is for Italian Vogue. And then was chosen by this exhibition that Comme des Garçons sponsored. How was working with different photographers with different aesthetics and posing for them in front of the camera? How was it? And if you had a favorite photographer?
Oh my God, all of these are my favorite photographers because you can't, you just have to say that you've had a great experience with someone who knows how to direct and knows what they want and has an idea of who you are as well. And they allow you to be yourself. And then you sort of like get the feeling, over here, over there. No, let's do it this way. And, you kind of feel each other's energy and something happens. It's like magic. You think with this Peter Lindbergh, he was very wonderful. He would shout out, "That's gorgeous, great, super, super, super." He would say all the time. And he worked with my daughter recently.
Really?
Yeah, and so my daughter's getting to work with the same masters, some of them. Yeah.
We will get there lately, but Anna Cleveland, Pat and Paul's daughter is a wonderful, unconventional beauty, and she's very high on demand right now. She's one of the hottest fashion model, young fashion model now. So Pat finally got her American cover, 1972, and this is Interview magazine that Andy Warhol founded in the early 70s. So how did it happen, and who photographed you?
This is the second issue of Interview when they started doing color, and Richard Bernstein was sort of doing the art direction. Richard Bernstein is the one who put all the color on all of these Interview covers of all the movie stars. He never really got credit for it, but he was an amazing artist. And Barry Berenson did this photograph.
Again, Barry.
In her apartment. It was a wild afternoon. She had a beautiful little apartment with all hearts and white studio loft. A little bit ahead of her time because nobody had anything like that. But it was fun.
How did is the Andy who approached you? How did you get the cover?
Well, Andy and Antonio Lopez and Karl and all of us, we were all in Europe together, and we'd always go out in the evening to these sort of like Toulouse-Lautrec little places in the night, and I think
Club Set,
La Club Set, and some other little places, and I don't know. It's just part of the family. You didn't think very much about it. You just, let's do pictures. Okay. You're at someone's house and you say, let's do a picture. But they just happen to be the editor of, Interview, or they happen to be someone who could do these things, just for fun. Just for fun.
Another wonderful and fun moment. This is an important picture of an important, very important moment in fashion history. Was called Le Divertissement de Versailles, and is when American fashion was put on a map, on an international map. Was a gala, was a fundraising that was organized by Hélène de Rothschild in order to restore the Palace of Versailles. And 5 American designers showed their creation. There was not a competition, but they showed their creation against other 5 European, French designers. And the American designers had a lot of black models, and the show was amazing, was 10 times better than the French. The French designers were very stiff. And the American designer won this kind of competition for their, spontaneity. Spontaneità?
Yes.
Spontaneity. And so tell us about this wonderful moment where you were Pat is the one at the end, and this is Liza Minnelli who was singing.
Well, it was so funny, doing this show because there were great stars. There was Josephine Baker, Nureyev, all of these American designers, Donna Karan, Bill Blass, Halston, Stephen Burrows, Oscar de la Renta, Yves Laurent. Oh my God, there were so many wonderful designers in the show. But our section was very simple because all we had was these girls from 7th Avenue who knew how to move the clothes. And so when we got out there and that music, Love Unlimited, came on, I think Paris and the whole French society fell in love with us because we started walking to the music, da 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 da, and we came in and we walked like we were enjoying the life, and we all moved to that chiffon and bugle beads, and all the lighting was simple. And then we had this number. There I am way over there. And I was finally a showgirl, third row center for Liza Minnelli. And it felt so good, and we came out singing, and she sang, I'm gonna step out on the Champs-Élysées when they...
Bonjour Paris.
Yeah, Bonjour Paris. And so then how it went is that when we finished doing our show, I think they embraced us. The love story started between the Paris couture and the American couture, and we were all suddenly on the same level because of this little show that we did to save Versailles. Well, it wasn't little, actually. All the royalty of France was there. You've never seen so many jewels in your life. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a huge event. I mean,
amazing.
everybody. Also, Princess Grace came from Monaco. Jacqueline Deribe. I mean, the Les Tout Paris was there.
The Rothschilds.
The Rothschild. Yes.
Everyone was there, and we walked down the hall of mirrors, and I walked down the hall of mirrors with the 6'7" Givenchy, and he was so handsome and elegant, and I was like on cloud nine. I was floating along, talking to him, and it was lovely. And oh God.
So the American designers were Anne Klein, Stephen Burrows, Bill Blass, Halston, and Oscar de Laurent. And the French were Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy, Emmanuel Ungaro, Pierre Cardin, and Marc Bohan for Christian Dior. And was
all in one room at the same time.
And there is an interesting book if you are interested in this kind of in this page of fashion history that really is a very important moment. Robin Givhan wrote an interesting book that was published a couple of years ago, called The Battle of Versailles. Okay, Pat, you became you became a celebrity within the celebrities. So you all of a sudden starting, hanging out with a lot of famous people.
It was wonderful because when I was living in Paris, I would go have lunch with Salvador Dali, and in the afternoon I would spend with Picasso's daughter, and it was just that whole entourage of artists. This was wonderful. He did a nice drawing of me.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was really wonderful. He took it home to Spain. And, it was wonderful tea time at the Continental with Salvador Dali. All the strange, wonderful artists would show up, and he'd always sit very quietly and look around, entertained. And it's all in my book, actually, in this story.
We have to get the book.
Yeah.
So you are here with Diana Ross.
Oh, yes, my idol. I loved her. Ain't no mountain high enough. If that didn't get you up to make you do something. So this is from The Wiz, and this was filmed down. This was a movie. Joel Schumacher was writing this film, The Wizard of Oz, and this was filmed down at the World Trade Center, down there when it was still something fantastic. And we became friendly with each other. I met her children. They're all grown up now. I used to take them little presents. There were a lot of stars, and all the girls, all the designers participated in this. In every scene, there was designers from Calvin and Stephen, and everybody gave costumes for this movie. It was wonderful.
Andy?
This is at Regine's, and I was wearing this clothing I have on is Josephine Baker's clothing, and I was singing a little number like Josephine. So I was singing that, and all the time Andy's always whispering to me little secrets whenever he gets me alone. Now, do you think that man over there is handsome, or is that someone you should meet? He was always like trying to make me meet people.
The matchmaker, right? Some of you know this the lovely man because he was here a couple of years ago, André Talley.
Oh, he's so tall. I always love to give him a hug because he's so tall. When he hugs you, he kind of picks you up, makes you feel tall too. And this was at the Yves Saint Laurent show, and he came backstage, and we were so happy to see each other.
When you did the interview cover, André was at interview back then or not? It was still with Lavrillen, right?
Yeah, he was still a student. He was still very young. No, he had just arrived in Paris, and we were already busy and everything. But, he came into his own when he started writing for Vogue, and Mrs. Vreeland loved him. He was just charming, very tall and very wonderful.
Then he became a very good friend of Karl Lagerfeld as well. And yes, your idol, Josephine Baker.
Two, actually. There's Daniel Luna in the corner and Josephine Baker. This is in Rome. Of course, I look silly because I'm trying to get the picture taken. No, use those little brownie cameras. But anyway, there she is. It was a wonderful performance. And, the story is that, in my family, my great auntie was her Sunday school teacher, Josephine Baker, Sunday school teacher, when she was a little girl, and that was in St. Louis. And I remember the family stories about this little girl that had to get away, and they were very poor, and my auntie taught her how to play the piano and sing. And so she told her, run away, go with them. And she went to shuffle along, and that's how Josephine Baker got out of town. My auntie helped.
And you really worship Josephine Baker, right?
Sorry?
You really love Josephine
I
Baker.
really love the fact that she was a showgirl. I mean, she would have been model later on, but she was a real showgirl, and she was astonishing because she had faith in herself, and she helped many, many people to survive. And her son, Claude, was here in New York. He had the Josephine Baker restaurant, and she just did wonderful things for people. Wonderful story about her life.
And I don't. Okay. I can't find it, but there is also a picture of Pat posing as Josephine Baker with the banana, the banana skirt for Italian Vogue. Well, I couldn't find it now, but
that's okay.
It used to be here.
That's Italian Vogue for you.
Yes.
Ooh, bananas.
So, is it true that you're doing a record on Josephine Baker, or you want to record something on Josephine Baker?
Yes, for my book party, I performed in a golden dress and a headdress with golden feathers, and I had boys dancing.
Here in New York?
In New York, at the Jane Hotel, and I had boys dressed in bananas. Ooh. Oh, goodness, I hope they made it out alive. Anyway, and I sang this song dedicated to one of my idols, Josephine, Tonight, Josephine. And so it's on iTunes, and I had a great time. I just think she's great. She deserves a lot of applause. She had a hard time. It's during the war. She helped everybody in that way to survive.
Oh, yes, yes.
Great person.
Now it's time for a little gossip.
Uh-oh.
Okay, this is Pat in her book, she's quite candid in revealing all the little flirts that she had with a lot of stars before meeting the man of her life, who's this gentleman, Paul,
my love.
Exactly, the number one. But before the number one, she had little flirts with Mick Jagger, Ryan O'Neal, Michael Douglas, and this is nice. This is a nice picture because she is with Dick Avedon, very young Dick Avedon, the night that she met Warren Beatty.
And he's looking at me in this photograph.
So tell us, your fascination with him and.
Well, when I was a little girl, I went to the movies with my mother, and I saw this image on this giant screen. This beautiful young man, so sincere, so in love, so poor. I felt sorry for him, but I loved the way he looked, and so I had that in my heart. And I
Which
thought,
movie was that?
Splendor in the Grass. And I saw that movie. I wasn't allowed, really, but I saw it. And it sort of stuck in my heart. And I thought, if I have to meet anyone and love anyone, I will love him. And it happened. So it's what you believe. I think it's that little Jiminy Cricket in the back of your head saying, if you believe, it can come true. And so that night he waited for me. But it's all in the book. He waited for me. And, it seemed that we had a lovely time.
Good. You're still in touch with him or not?
No, well, I recently met his daughter. So we were at a ball in Paris. They had a coming out of all society girls, and my daughter was one of them, and his daughter was one of them. And I was sitting there with Anita, and we were back to back, and I didn't realize she was behind me, and she was taking this video, and I said, oh, she's a nice lady. But then I didn't think that she knew that I knew her husband in that way.
The father.
So it's all kind of weird, in our little society. Ooh, whatever.
Italian Vogue, that was 1978, and she finally got the cover.
Yes. Thanks
Okay.
to Valentino and Italian Vogue. They really put that together, and they felt it's your turn. This is Francois Lemay. And
The photographer.
yeah, and the clothing, Valentino. I was working very steadily with Valentino at the time, doing fittings, being at his atelier near the Piazza di Spagna. It was very, very, very luxurious, as a Valentino can be. And so there I was. This photograph was taken in Paris. I guess I was the lucky one that day. They dressed me in Valentino.
This is Pat and Valentino at the end of a fashion show.
Oh my God.
Probably the same.
He's so much fun. He is so much fun. He loves women so much. And he always says, but when we get older, we must cover this part. But he was so young then, and he's very talented. He's quite a showman. And we used to go down to where he was born and look at where his town was. But I met...
Voghera.
Yes, it was wonderful to be with. But we were friends. He would invite me to his house on Appia Antica, and he had peacocks, and his mother lived there, and he had to be a really good boy when his mother was around. And he was very spiritual. He was a very good person, funny, and he could tap dance.
And he has also a very good sense of humor,
He
Valentino.
is so funny.
Believe it or not, I mean, you don't sometimes think that he's a lot of fun, but he's a real, I mean, he has a great sense of humor.
He's
and
the
very nice to
funniest person. I
be
love
around
him
with.
so much, really. And today, if we see each other, it's just like we go through crowds to get to each other to have that good moment. You know, it's just wonderful. He doesn't forget. He doesn't forget.
No, it doesn't.
No.
And again, for Italian Vogue, and this is Pat, all dressed up in Valentino, and photographed by Horst. Horst was a legend when, you know, Pat took this photograph. When he took this photograph of Pat, 1978.
This is actually reaching the pinnacle for me, because I always admired his photographs of, you know, the great 1920s movie stars. And when he photographed me, actually this is my favorite photograph, because looking at him and realizing he'd seen all of those beautiful women. And then one time we worked together for Halston. I said, Horst, my teeth look all gray in this photo. He says, oh, you have to forgive me. I only know how to do black and white. Technology was passing him by, but he was a really lovely, he used to wear a little bow tie.
Very, very nice. Very, very nice guy, real gentleman,
Yeah,
you know.
really from
like
that time.
Cecil Beaton,
Yes, from
yeah,
that
old
time.
guards. Pat, apart from Valentino and Gianfranco Ferré, had a very strong relationship with another an Italian designer, the late Franco Moschino. And this is Pat actually impersonating the olive oil, which was one of Moschino's most famous characters.
Yeah, one of his favorite characters, and it was never seen before that a model would come out looking like olive oil, since that was my pet name growing up. Oh, you look just like olive oil. Well, he brought it to life. So he was my Popeye, and I was his olive oil, and coming out on this stage and doing this character was never seen before. He was a theatrical genius. He knew how to make a show come to life, and we enjoyed. Girls were crawling on the runway wearing cow dresses. They were the Pope. They were everything you could imagine. He had an amazing, amazing imagination.
And again, Pat, with some grocery
On the runway.
on the runway for another Valentino show.
Moschino.
Moschino, sorry, not Valentino.
Yeah.
Moschino. And apart from loving Italian fashion, you also lived in Italy for a while, right?
Yes, in Lago Maggiore. Oh, so pristine, so clean. If you ever go there, this is a place you must invest in going in, because it was a place where Byron lived, and the princes and princesses live on these little islands, and they have the Borromeo Hotel, and the Picasso stayed there, and Farewell to Arms was written there. My God, it is so beautiful.
So why did you decide with Paul to go to Italy?
I fell in love with Italy.
That was in the early 80s, right?
That was in the early 80s. I opened a model agency there. I taught girls to walk. I did choreography. I did everything in Italy. My dreams were coming through like magic. I wrote a book of poetry. I sat on the lake and I looked at the gorgeousness. So beautiful, my God. Above the mountains with white snow, below the palm trees and the Italian gardens. What more do you want?
You and Paul have 2 kids.
Yeah.
One son and 1 daughter. So they grew up there. They speak Italian.
Better than I do.
They are totally bilingual.
Yes, they speak many more languages, many languages. I mean, it's a thing that you get. I mean, they had a really good education. They have a really good education system. They have good doctors. They have everything, good food. And I just figured, yes, let me move here. My partner in my agency lived there on the lake. We had really beautiful houses looking out over to the mountains. And so Italy is a beautiful...
And you also hang out with the Missonis, that they live nearby, right?
Yeah, they lived across...
the Missoni family.
Yes, on the lake over. But they would always make fun. They said, you live on the side of the lake on the side of the mountains, so you have to climb up all the time. We'd always joke. And their children grew up with my children. And, you know, I knew Rosita and Ty. And they were a lovely couple, and I just love family. Italy is all about family. You know, every family welcomes you with open arms. Everybody's just so kind and generous there. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's true. It's
Yes.
very true.
Yes, but thank you. Thank you.
It's true.
Yes, it's true.
It's
Thank
true.
you.
Yeah,
Right.
it's very true.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And the ice cream, don't forget the ice cream. Gelati.
Pat is still working, and this is another iconic photographs that appear on Italian Vogue in the famous black issue. Franca Sozzani did an entire issue devoted to black models, and that picture was taken in the black issue was in 2008. And in June 2008, and was a blockbuster, sold out. And this is a picture that Stephen Meisel took of Pat, and you grew up with him, right,
Yeah,
Pat?
we went to the same school, art and design. I remember the little skinny boy with long hair down to here, and he was a painter at the time.
Illustrator, yes.
Illustrator. So he did some really beautiful artwork, and we had Donna Jordan went to the school, and we all kind of had a wild time there together.
So how was working after all these years, working with him?
I was so surprised that he was a photographer and doing so well. Whoever knew that would translate into such an amazing career. And he did very, very well for himself. He's amazing. You know, it just goes to show you art translates into many different ways of expression, you know. I'm very proud of him. I guess he's proud of me too.
Oh yes, of course, of
We
course.
worked together.
Yes, and this was a wonderful photograph. So let's go a little bit more personal. We are about to finish, and we're going to talk about Pat's family.
Paul.
So this is a picture of Pat with Paul,
In Bali.
the number 1. So tell us, who is Paul? How did you meet him?
Paul
and,
is a very beautiful young boy that I met with Our Gallant. I was doing a shooting for Our Gallant with Paul's sister, Apollonia von Ravenstein. She's a very famous model. She worked with Parkinson all the time. But she said, oh, my brother's too young for you now. And I was a little bit older, so I said, I'll get you later. And I did in Paris. And it's in my book. But we went to Bali. And I knew that when I got back to Bali, I went to Bali one time before. And I said, if I ever come back here, I want to be with my true love. And I was. And it happened.
when did you marry him?
In 84 in Holland, and we had one of those Dutch weddings with the wooden shoes on the boats and the whole family dressed in costume. It was a storybook wedding. It was really something out of a fairy tale.
And they're still together, and they're very happy together, so it's a wonderful couple.
Yeah.
And Pat has, as we mentioned before, a wonderful daughter that is, his name is Anna, and she's a model. And Pat, often poses with, with Anna. And this is Lanvin.
It's great. I love that shooting. We were like two snakes in love. We wrap our bodies.
Who took this picture?
It was Tim Walker.
Well, Tim Walker.
Tim Walker. He's very, very important in fashion.
Yes.
Photography.
Yeah. He works for us. And recently, she did this for Neiman Marcus.
Yes, that's Reuven Avador. He's a Hollywood portrait photographer. And it was sort of wild doing this catalog because the scenery on the set was being changed behind us with living owls and ostriches coming on the set. And it was like you turn around and there's a wild animal behind you. And it was lovely. It was just like a Jasper Johns moment. It was really artistic. Yeah. Beautiful.
What is the best advice that you gave Anna when she decided to work in this industry?
Oh, cleanliness is next to godliness. I guess you all heard that one. But the other thing is just, I had to go with her most of the time and chaperone her. But now she's a grown-up, but I always told her, stay rooted in the beauty that you have within yourself and don't get carried too far away with trends and things, because Little Red Riding Hood, it's all these things you tell your daughter. And I think I listened to my mom. That's why I survived, and I guess she's listened to me. That's why she's having a good success.
You are very close to her, right?
Yeah, very close. Right now, she's down in Peru doing something. She went with, who did she go to? Rio? With Jean-Paul Gaultier to Rio to do some pictures. And so she's traveling the world and going to the same places that I've been to with some of the same people. So I guess she's having a great time.
And she's also has that place in Paris where very close to where you used to live, right?
Where I used to live in Châtelet, and I said, it's history repeating itself. Yeah, it really is.
Okay, last picture, the happy family, but really, really happy family. This is one of the, most, I think is interesting to have, a family that is so close like yours. Yeah. And so we decided to put them in our cover in last June. And so let's introduce everybody. This is Paul, Pat, Anna, and the son.
Noel.
Tell us a little bit about
Noel
him.
is he's very talented. He went to school for business, but he decided to be an artist, and he has a lot of talents. He speaks 5 languages. He's a yoga instructor. So right now he's in Las Vegas teaching, but he's invited to travel all over the world. He's the spiritual. He's our guru.
Do you practice yoga in the family?
Yes, and if we don't do it right, it's like, no, Mom, no, Dad, you better get up and go. And he's right, we have to exercise. We can't only strut the runway. We need to get out there and use our muscles before we listen. So he's very inspiring. He's an entrepreneur kind of person. Yeah.
Your mantra is?
My mantra is always, stay blissful within your own heart and listen to your inspirations and stick with the people you love first above everything else.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.